And we're live. All right. Hey, it's me, Bill Patton, and I'm with,
Dave Smith.
and we are here to talk about. I feel like Hans and Franz right now all of a sudden. And we are here to pump you up. So we're here to talk about on-court coaching, and this is part two of another one. And the reason for part two is because I'm turning this into an ebook on-court coaching because it's such a vital topic to being successful as a coach. Because a lot can go right or wrong, or you can just not mess it up with your on-court coaching. Because sometimes it comes down to that. In fact, what the other thing we should do is we should talk about when things are going so right. So we're going to talk about when things are going incredibly well, when there are problems, and what to do after the match. All right, so I'm going to kick it off. So one time I had this kid, and she's playing a girl who she had 3-set battles with twice in the regular season, and she just barely eked out these 3-set wins. So she's playing her in the league tournament, and everybody can't wait to see this match, right? Because it's just going to be a titanic battle. And then, but what does my girl do? She goes completely in the zone, right? And she hits 7 aces and 10 forehand winners and 3 backhand winners and, 10 points at the net. And she's hitting lines all over the place. Right. So I'm like, do I talk to her? Right. So the other coach went and talked to his player numerous times. And so I just kind of went out and I went, hey, Michelle, you're doing pretty good. So, hey, I just kind of wanted to say hi, just carry on.
Yep.
No, she beat the girl 0-0. And I think the other girl might have won 3 or 4 points because Michelle missed lines a couple of times. But, so that's my first story of, hey, when they're going so good, don't try to meddle with it.
Yeah, there is a balance because there is always going to be an ebb and flow of any match, especially one that has momentum in one direction. If your player, like your player, Bill, has just been playing lights out, it's very hard for a lot of players to maintain that unconscious, in the zone mindset. And so a coach can take them out of that mindset or kind of help promote it and by doing very little, but still being, because if you didn't go out there and then your player might be like, where's my coach? I'm doing so great. Why isn't he out here commending me or whatever? And so the bottom line is, as a coach, and this is where experience comes in. I certainly know from my 48 years coaching and teaching at this higher level of high schools and around the country, I without question, I'm a much better in tune coach than I was 30 years ago. But that being said, I think you nailed it. When you're walking out there, to just show yourself, I literally just fist pump and would turn around and walk out. I wouldn't even say a word sometimes. Yeah. I just wanted them to know, hey, I've got your back. See ya. You're doing great. Talk to you later. And so that's a big one when your player is playing well, to kind of keep them not too much focused on, hey, I'm playing great, because that's the first way to bring yourself down.
Yeah, and the last thing you'd want to say is, wow, you're in the zone.
Yep. And they are no longer in.
Yeah. Here's another one, and this kind of gets into the problem created for when the player, comes to the realization, I'm playing great, and then they or their coach sort of snaps them out of it. What do you do then, right? So I had this kid who we were the 9 seed, and we beat 8 for the right to play the number 1 seed. And my kid comes out and he's just completely unconscious and destroys their player in the first set. And then the other kid, though, raised his game, which when you're playing good competition, you should expect that, right? So the other kid raised his game, and then Brandon came down just a little bit, right? And now he's down a break in the second, right? So we didn't obsess about, okay, now you're not completely zoned out. We just went back to our process we always do, which is compete, right? Give 100% effort, enjoy the competition, show yourself strong and wise, and learn from every match. All right, so okay, maybe you'll go back in the zone, maybe you won't, but until you do, compete this way. And he ended up, it's funny because he ended up like cramping in his hand. He was down a break in the third set, and then he served at 5-6. He served at 4-5 and 5-6 and faced match points then, and he was down 5-2 in the third set tiebreaker. And I think he ended up winning 13-11 third set tiebreaker on guts. So he won it even though he wasn't in the zone.
Right. Well, I think as a coach, you've got to train your players to understand those dynamics will change, whether it's in your favor or goes downward, but it can always change back if you recognize patterns and believe that it's never permanent. So many times, I think I've mentioned this with you a few times, especially on my girls' side, but definitely with the boys too. We had 16 matches over the last 4 years that we were down match point and came back and won those matches. 16, not 1, not 4, 16 times. We went undefeated every year for 6 years, but some of those matches, I mean, you say, well, you were so dominant. Well, I'll be very honest. There were a few nail biters that could have gone south. And I think one of the biggest things was composure and the belief that I put with every player, girl or boy, that yes, things are not always going to go exactly as planned. But if you stay, like you use the word fighting, my dad always had a great saying. It said, it's not the size of the boy in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the boy. It can be applied to girls as well, but it's just an old saying from the 70s that I've always remembered, because how many times, in fact, this little girl behind me right here weighs probably 87 pounds, and she was a 3-time state champion. And so needless to say, the fight was there. And I just have to say that, I think part of that is that we programmed our kids to understand the dynamics of momentum and how it can change and how you can get it back in your court.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, of course, being down match point or being down a break, is a problem in a match for sure. So, but now I kind of want to shift things towards like other types of problems. So, for instance, a player might be nursing an injury going into a match, or they get injured while they're playing. And, and then you have players who are facing adversity in their lives. And now because they're distracted by things happening in their personal life, that's affecting their match. So, I had this one situation where I had a player who was in therapy, and I knew that there was a lot of dysfunction in the home and all that. And she's in the middle of this match. She's won the first set 6-love, but now she feels like it's slipping away because the other girl raised her game a little bit. And then she comes to me on a changeover and she says, "Coach, I feel like all of my problems have come back on me." Right. And then that's where, as a coach, you have to take a deep breath. Right. And and this is where, it's good to have good answers too, because, nothing overly burdensome. So I just said this: look, there's only 2 things that really can help you right now. And that's going to be breathing and good thinking. So as much as possible, just breathe, and then try to steer your thoughts as much as you can about what you need to do to win the match. And it doesn't mean that other things that are bothering you aren't going to come back into your mind, but just recognize it and then try to shift back. And, again, she came back and she actually won in straight sets, but it was a very close tiebreaker that she won. So sometimes the mental and emotional stuff comes up,
Right. Reminding your player, when the player like that, or anytime a player is feeling the momentum shifting or they're feeling the nerves, you have to also remind your student, hey, the other person feels the same pressure you're feeling. And whoever responds to the pressure, either by doing what you said, staying focused on the moment, I call it present focus, and can override that desire, because we're all faced with that. Oh my gosh, oh woe is me, I'm losing, I'm failing, I'm going to choke. I mean, all those negatives into our minds far more than the things like I'm gonna fight and come back and win this. That the alternative is more likely that the kid is going to have a negative mindset if they're either losing or they're not maintaining that same playability that they had prior. So obviously keeping a player focused on things that are outside the mental side. Breathing is a great one. Focusing on seeing the ball hit your strings, just a simple getting back, trusting yourself. Again, we train our players to have exceptionally good strokes. So now it comes down to the nerves, make our eyes want to look ahead. Here's one of the problems a lot of coaches don't understand. When we're faced with adversarial situations, competition, we want to see what's in front of us. That's where the trouble is. That's where the problem is. Our opponent's over there facing us. So when we're hitting a stroke, any shot, volley, overhead serve, whatever, forehand, backhand, the tendency is the player to face the problem, to look at their opponent even while they're stroking the ball, because that they're anxious. They want to see what's in front of them right now. And if they don't stay focused on the contact point and trusting their stroke and have a visualization of where they want to hit the ball, they're going to miss-hit the ball. They're going to frame it. That's going to cause even more anxiety, more problematic issues. So keeping a player trusting their resolve, and giving them those simple things to move them away. I love, we've talked about Jim Lair's 16-second cure video, which is all about that, just that concept of bringing a student back into the present mindset rather than future focus. Oh my gosh, I'm going to lose. Oh my gosh, I'm winning. Those will not help you hit the next shot.
Yeah, I have a couple things too off of what you just said. So Jim Lair has this great old book called Mental Toughness Training for Sports, and in it he has a quiz. And over the years he has refined his testing that he puts out. But for a long time I used his tests on my teams until the results were always really predictable. So the results always came out the same way. But the interesting thing, I still gave the test because it told me about individual players. But here's one thing I found in general. In general, girls have a harder time visualizing themselves being successful, right? Because boys, dribble a basketball and they go 3, 2, 1. He wins the championship. Woo, right? So that's boy behavior. And when I tell that to girls, they're like, yeah, that's weird. Right? But boys struggle with negative energy. They struggle with being down on themselves if things aren't going well. Girls, on the other hand, generally have better positive energy, right? And boys can visualize themselves being successful. So, and those are very generalized because there are always outliers to that. So don't take it as me being sexist or whatever. Then the other thing is, back to your point about having an external focus, and this solves a problem. It solves a problem of your opponent is in the zone. Because I had this kid, Stefan, who he was the number one player in the league, but the 2, 3, and 4 players were all very, very close. There was a lot of parity. So any of those next 3 players could beat him if he wasn't on top of his game. So the second best player in league was also very streaky, and he almost always came out on fire at the beginning of a match. So Stefan was almost always down a break in the first set, right? But this particular time, it's the league finals, and there's all these eyeballs, and the other kid goes up 2 breaks, right? He's up 4-love, 2 breaks, right? And so I can't even talk to him until a changeover, right? So he won a game and it's 4-1. So I just go out there and I said, hey, look, just look at your contact point. Just, because he's playing so well, he has you at C and you're not hitting a clean contact point.
Right.
So just look at your contact point and look at it. Is it clean? And then do the work that you need to do to get in position to hit that ball back. In 5 minutes, it was 4-all.
Nice.
And then he ended up winning 7-5, 6-2. So absolutely, it's that one thing that you take them out of their internal turmoil, because he was feeling it. He was feeling, the problem of having been down 4-love and the other kid's on fire. What do I do? So absolutely on the external focus. So now, how about this? Let's get into kind of like the injury thing. Let's say, here's the scenario: you have a player who is nursing like a nagging injury. It's not a career ender. It's not a don't play because you're too hurt. But how do you manage that?
Well, you have to identify and have the player be responsible to acknowledge whether they can or can't play because of the injury, first and foremost. This girl right here was playing she was my number one singles, and she was playing the number one singles player who had used to go to our school, but when a new school opened up, the girl moved over there because she knew she probably couldn't be number one on our team. So anyway, Morgan, this girl's playing her, and she's fighting migraine, menstrual, what you'll have to deal with if you're a girls coach. Yeah. And I asked Morgan, I said, are you sure you want to play Avery today? Because it'll be a good match. And Morgan says, absolutely, I'm not. And Morgan was throwing up. I mean, she was definitely not feeling it, but she wanted to play, and she goes out there and beats this girl 0-2. I mean, but again, she stayed within herself. She didn't try to get shots that she couldn't get. She made Avery hit 3, 4, 5 balls, and Avery would miss almost incessantly enough times to and they used to be very close. It was so funny to watch the difference. But that is one of the things, is make sure you identify the injury. Number 2, an injury is sometimes psychosomatic in that, I feel there's something there, and that's their crutch. So if I lose, I have a crutch. Oh, my ankle was sore. I've got a blister. I'm, whatever. And anytime, and that's one of the things we teach, and Jim Lehrer talked about this too. Anytime you create that crutch, you will never have that fighting spirit, because you'll always it's sort of like a person who tanks a match. Well, I could have won, but I didn't try. It gives you that ego protection mechanism to explain away why you lost.
Let me break in on this one. So I had this kid who had one little injury after another, and you have to take it seriously. You have to, because if you don't take it seriously, you can really wreck the morale of your team. So I sent this kid to the trainer. We happen to have a really good trainer on campus. So he checks him out. He's like, you know what? I didn't see anything wrong with that kid. Right. So the kid comes back, and then a couple of weeks later, he's got another injury. I'm like, okay, go see the trainer. Trainer tells me nothing wrong. So, but every time, because you never know when it's going to be real. So you can't dismiss it. Back to this kid, Stefan, he, in the first time he played this kid who always comes out hot, he ends up losing the first set 6-1, and I noticed he wasn't moving well. And I come out on the changeover, and this was very early in our relationship. And I'm like, what's going on with you? Right. And he's like, I think I might have a little bit of a groin injury. Right. I'm like, what? Because he was afraid to tell me because he thought I might overreact. Right. And I'm like, okay, you have a groin injury. All right. So the first thing is, your future's on the line here. So if you feel like in any way you're going to make it worse, you have permission to stop at any time. Right. Now, for us to manage this, here's what's going to happen. Do not run full speed for any shots, right? Make a quick first step always, but don't go full out and don't go full extension with your legs to go after a ball. Just let him hit a few winners on you, right? So he comes back and wins. Not every story ends with a win.
Nope.
He could have retired after the first set. Same kid, Stefan, comes in. It's a match against the same team, same kid. And he's like, Coach, I'm sick, right? And I'm like, oh, man, if you don't play, I have to shift everybody up. That's NorCal rules. Everybody on the team basically shifts up one. And then that gives them a real chance to beat us. So I'm like, all right, Stefan, here's what you have to do. Just get through one set, then you can retire. I know you're sick. And you don't even have to try. Just lose the set, please. But I need you in the lineup to fill that spot so everybody else doesn't have to go for him. So he goes and he plays one set, he loses, and then he retires. And then by rule, we do well and we win the match. So, those are a couple of different examples of things that you can be cognizant of. I mean, because obviously if a kid's sick, you don't want to make them more sick.
Right. Yep. The injury, the sickness, everything has to be, again, experienced as a coach and learning your players' idiosyncrasies. They're what I call their outs, meaning they're going to, I can't run a lap today, coach, because blah, blah, blah. But I'll kind of summarize this in one quick scenario or sentence, and that is, from day one of every season, I tell my players, you're going to have matches where you're going to be behind in a match and you're going to come back and win. Now, in the first year I took over this team, they hadn't won a region title in, I think, 5 years. And I said, we will win a region title this year and we will come back from different matches. And sure enough, Morgan, the one I mentioned her before, this one right here, ends up winning a third set tiebreaker after having multiple match points against her. And that set the tone for making me sound like I was a genius, because I said, you're going to come back from different matches. And now the belief had been established. And so every one of these players, this girl on where's my hand here, this girl right here, Tia, was down 0-6, 0-2 in the state finals. Semifinals, and turns that around and beats the girl like 3-1. And again, momentum shifts. You got to tell your players, momentum can and will shift. If you know how to recognize momentum shifts and then maximize them, you're going to be the one that's going to probably come out ahead. But like you said, Bill, we have lost individual matches. We've never lost a team match, but we've lost a few. The girl on this side, her and her partner, these two girls, lost in the semifinals of state, lost the first set, came back and were up 5-1 in the second, and ended up losing that set. So we lost in straight sets, and that was the only match these two girls had lost all year.
Yeah.
But that just showed you they were seniors. You could feel the angst among two girls, their last match of their career. They were ahead. They could feel that momentum shifting out of their hands. And one of the girls missed like 4 pretty easy volleys. And once that happens, that self-confidence just goes down the tubes, no matter what you as a coach can say or do. That was probably one of the few times that I felt like it was out of my hands. It was a fateful situation that I just felt like, it happens at times where it doesn't go in our favor.
Yeah. So, you reminded me of a story of when a couple of my girls one of them was a captain and another one was very influential. We were in a league where we were going to play 12 matches, and it's 7 matches per dual meet. And these kids came up with the idea that they wanted to go 84-0, right? And I'm like, I don't like that goal. I mean, let's win league and let's win going away, but anything can happen, to make that 83-1, and then what are you going to be, disappointed?
Right.
So I don't like that goal, but okay, whatever, you're into it. And then guess what happens? The two girls who came up with the goal were the ones who got sick on the match against the second place team, and then they were like, no, we have to play because we made the goal, and then they lost, and that was the reason why it was 83-1. And I'm like, okay, well, you baked it into the cake. I was against that idea, but now you're crying. Look at you, right? So trying not to go for perfection, I think, is also an important thing. But to wrap up this section, and we want to try to also finish this whole thing in about 10 more minutes, but bottom line, the most important thing that you need to communicate whenever there's any kind of problem is that you care more about the person and their short and long-term outcomes as people than you do about today's match. Because, if you don't want your player to become catastrophically injured because you pushed them too hard. You don't want your player to feel like you put pressure on a time when they were vulnerable. You don't want to, compromise that. So now, though, we're going to move on to how do you handle after the match with a win or a loss? All right. So, Dave, what's the first thing you ask or you tell a player after they have played?
Well, the first thing we do, no matter what, the first words out of my mouth is, I am proud of you. That is the most powerful statement to any boy or girl, or even an adult for that matter. I have many adults in my various programs, and I use the same phraseology with them as I do my juniors. And I've got several that call me, several ladies, older ladies that call me and just say, wow, I never had anybody believe in me this much, and et cetera, et cetera. So the first thing is always making sure that the tone of you is never like, oh, why'd you lose? Why'd you miss that shot that set up that comeback for your opponent, or blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's very easy to do. And I've seen coaches berate their kids, and I've even seen parents berate their kids after a match. And it's not the right time, even though it's fresh in their mind. I mean, with my daughter being a world ranked golfer, I had to catch myself many times driving home from a tournament. We always had a 4-hour drive, and I so much wanted to talk to her about the round. What was in your mind on this shot? Why, blah, blah, blah. And it was, I really learned through her more than anything that was not the time to do it. And so with my players, I think one of the things that I get so many notes from girls after they graduate, or boys after they graduate. And the first thing that most of them say is something like, Coach, thank you for believing in me. And I think you have to realize that if you can take a player that's lost a match and say, you've learned an extraordinarily valuable lesson out here today that's going to make you a better player than had you won. Now, that may or may not be true, but it is a positive outlook on a negative outcome. Yeah. And so I think that's the first thing I always say is make sure you're letting them know you're very proud of their effort. Can we work on it? Sure. We'll talk about that later. And then moving forward with just like, you know what, go rest up. We'll talk about the match another time, but maybe you learned a lot from this match. Let's take that and run with it.
Yeah. Awesome. So one thing I learned from Dick Gould, who won 17 national championships, and I think this is great. This makes him one of my favorite people on the planet, in terms of tennis for sure. Is he said he'd won 2 national championships and he was miserable. so they won their second one, and then immediately he started worrying about how another team was getting some hotshot freshmen, and he was graduating some of his top players, and how they were going to be vulnerable in the next year. And he kind of, he wasn't too happy. So he, at that point, he decided that he was going to do it because he enjoys it. And so then the next year he started asking his players, first question he asked after their match was, "Did you have fun?" And this is like something that I do always after every lesson, after every practice, after every match. I ask my players if they had fun, and then also I pay special attention when they say no or when they hesitate, because now I want to dig into that. I want to find out what was it. Was it something in your play? Was it something about the way the opponent was acting? And then, that can go any number of ways. But even if you don't actually get to the bottom of it, the message that you send by asking the question is that your first priority is that they enjoy it. So, and I think that's really a huge thing. Also, right now I'm coaching a middle school team. So my post-match briefings are very short. I ask them, what's one thing you did well? And what's one thing that you could do better? And then if they're playing doubles, I say, what's one thing that your partner did well? And then I don't ask them what's one thing your partner could do better. So, but with high school kids, they can think on a higher level. So we'll get into, did you give 100% effort? Did you enjoy the competition? Did you show yourself strong and wise? What did you learn from this? And it's the same, and they can anticipate it, and they can start to learn to give those answers better. So we've got about 3 minutes left. Dave, what else do you have to add to that?
Well, I think we've covered it, because I think the biggest thing that you can take away from that is the caring attitude that you show your team, your players, your individuals, and trusting yourself, and understanding there's only so much a great coach can do to influence a player's performance. The more that you think you can influence a player's performance, I think you're going to go down down a rabbit hole that you can't get out of. So I think you have to be very diligent about how you train your players, both emotionally, mentally, physically, stroke performance, technique, etc. And then trust them, trust yourself, trust them. And I literally feel that is where I've seen, especially in the last 7-8 years when I came back to high school coaching, and noticed how many coaches tried to micromanage their players and it always backfired. I mean, I could count. I would go to my assistant coach and I'd walk out, give a high five. Hey, your shoes look great. Walk off. These other coaches are just jabbering to their players, trying to get 4,000 words in 2 minutes. And I will turn to my assistant after I walk back and I say, we're going to win the next 2 games. And inevitably, I had some assistants who were newer, and they're like, how'd you know that? I said,
yeah,
it's pretty predictable when you've seen it hundreds and hundreds of times.
Yeah, no, and I think one of my favorite things is I go out and I give some very brief, advice, and the other coach is going on and on and on. And then when the coach turns away, then the player shakes their head like a dog that just came out of the lake, right, and is trying to get dry. And I'm like, oh, there's a great player-coach relationship right there.
Yep.
So yeah, that's when you have them. And so, we want to be the converse of that. So bottom line, everything about on-court coaching is about developing that relationship. One thing we didn't get into is, the fact that some players are not going to be as receptive to the coaching. So just know that. And then, put your efforts more into the players that are more receptive to hearing it. And, don't try to, and then just try to nurture that relationship with the kids who are not open to it. We could go on and on, but, everybody is going to have one player who's just not that excited about getting coached.
Well, and that goes with a new coach who's taken over a program, maybe a decent program. And I remember when I took over the team that we won, never lost a match in the 5 years I coached. But when I walked onto that team, there were some pretty good players. They were, and I could tell from their nonverbal communication that they were like, yeah, we'll see what this coach knows. I don't know if they knew my reputation that well, and most kids don't. It didn't matter to me. I didn't care whether they knew what my history had been in California and Arizona, but that didn't matter. My goal was to give them the belief in me through action, not through verbiage or telling them. And so when you're walking onto a new team, understand, like Bill just said, there's going to be players who doubt you, who maybe think they know more than you do, or don't like to be told what to do. I have a son who's like that, that just are. And so you have to, that's the greatest thing as a high school coach, in my opinion, to be able to recognize these diverse personalities and then having to mold your actions with each one differently, slightly differently. Definitely the player who does that eventually will come around. And I cannot tell you, the young lady who was a senior, who was the number one player when I first took over the team, she was like that. She did not trust that I would be able to bring that team to a state championship. And by her senior year, she was tears and grateful, and her notes to me were extremely appreciative of the fact that I did help her and the team achieve our goals. So yeah, whatever Bill said there as far as individuals that are different, understand that is very true.
I think that's one of my favorite things to hear is whatever Bill said.
That's whatever he said.
Wow.
I didn't mean it like that. I meant what he was saying is very true.
A golden moment here. So thank you for that. Hey, thanks everybody for watching. Thanks, Dave, for your time. And if you're just popping on now, this will be live on YouTube in a little bit. It's going to stay live on my Facebook and also LinkedIn, of all places. So anyway, all right. Hey, thanks, Dave. I got to go cook some brunch for my lovely wife.
Enjoy.
And, go out there and do some great on-court coaching today or next time you have a match. All right. Take care.
Take care.